Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting a couple minutes while everyone joins and connects. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Malotkin. I'm the Vice President of the ISACA Winnipeg chapter. Thanks so much for being here. Day 2 of the Western Canada Information Security Conference. It's been a pretty unique year. Unfortunately, as you know, last year we had to scratch our event altogether. This year it's a totally different delivery on this virtual platform. I just want to double down on my colleague Rob Chester's comments from yesterday and congratulate the organizing committee led by John Lamb for the extraordinary amount of work that went into putting this on. Even though it's all virtual and everybody's just sitting at their houses doing this conference, the level of effort and work that goes into delivering this has certainly not been any less than if it was at the RBC Convention Center. So congratulations to John and team. I have a couple quick announcements here, and then we're going to get into our keynote this morning. The first one is we have a WCISC YouTube channel that we will be publishing all the presentations from yesterday and today on, including the presentation that was missed by one of our sponsors, Psychotic, yesterday. That'll be going up on our YouTube channel, and we will be advertising the coordinates to the YouTube channel in the next day or so. Today we're doing something a little different with the vendor village area. Every vendor has been given out 5 codes that they can give out at their discretion to an attendee. And then you can email info@wcisc.ca with that code, and you will be entered into a draw to win a $250 Amazon gift card. So we encourage you to go and strike up conversations with our sponsors. They are a super important part of how this event is successful. Please give them a chat and hopefully see if they give you one of their 5 codes to be entered to win that $250 gift card. The chat is blowing up. If you're following the WCISC networking chat, there was a couple hundred people in there yesterday. It was constant action. The platform actually has a video chat feature. You can interact with our sponsors. You can interact one-on-one with each other as members. We would encourage people to try that video chat as much as possible. It kind of brings a little bit more personal touch to the virtual networking aspect of this event. So those are basically the announcements I have. I think it's going to be another great day. We're opening up with yet another great keynote from MK Palmore from Palo Alto Networks. I'm going to turn it over to MK right here, and we're going to get going.
So thanks for the intro, Kyle. Much apprecited, and thanks for everyone attending this particular conference. I think the last time that I was in Winnipeg physically was late 2019. So we are all missing the opportunity to join together, fellowship, network, exchange information. But as Kyle indicated, these virtual events, and I'm sure that we've all attended our fair share. These virtual events are still a way for us to collaborate and exchange information, and of course, talk in some relative detail about our thoughts in terms of the cybersecurity industry and where things are headed. So I am a longtime ISACA member, like many of you, and again, appreciate the opportunity to have Palo Alto Networks. Now, I guess on day 2 of your conference, offer yet another industry insight and keynote on how we see things emerging in terms of the threat landscape, how technology and all of us have had to respond to issues of the last year with the pandemic, and quite frankly, based on what we've seen transpire over the past 12 to 18 months, where we see the marketplace going and where you as security practitioners should be looking in terms of outlining your strategies for making sure that the security apparatus that you happen to be supporting and or leading, where you should be looking in terms of the horizon and how things are evolving. So again, appreciate the opportunity. I've been with Palo Alto Networks now for about 2 years. I'll give a little bit of background about myself, but I want to start off really thinking about the knowledge that we all possess in terms of the security apparatus that you, again, happen to support and or lead. There's an old, really old statement by Sun Tzu, and as you guys know, philosopher about strategy, war, warrior mindset, warrior mentality. And really the quote has to do with the knowledge that you take into these now day-to-day, week-to-week engagements in terms of protecting the environments that you're responsible for. This knowledge of yourself, knowledge of the adversary, and how deepening your knowledge on both ends of the spectrum can ensure the outcomes of the engagements for which you're responsible for, establishing a resilient cybersecurity apparatus, one that protects the enterprise, one that ensures the longevity of the enterprise. And while you can't stop every attack or every adversarial pitch against your enterprise, the more deepened knowledge that you have about your own capabilities and those of the adversary puts you on equal footing and, in fact, gives you an edge in terms of how it is that you establish the resiliency of your enterprise. So, again, 2 years with Palo Alto Networks. In fact, my anniversary with Palo Alto Networks is this week. But before that, a long time career with the US government, in fact, over 32 years, broken up between the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where I spent the majority of my career, 22 years, and the US Department of Defense. I started my career as a commissioned officer in the US Marine Corps. And it was during the latter part of my career with the FBI that I had the opportunity to actually lead a large-scale cybersecurity investigative and digital forensics team. And so that's where the emphasis comes in terms of the posturing and knowledge of adversarial mindsets and behavior, because oftentimes I think it is an unfortunate part of our profession that we sometimes forget why we are in the business that we're in. We get mired in the tactical engagements, the tactical details of the day-to-day, the search for a particular tool or resource that may help solve a very tactical issue. But strategically speaking, and for those of you who think strategically minded, we must understand that this adversarial mindset for which we are both responding to and preparing for is a constant and persistent mindset that allows the adversary really to gain a both tactical and strategic advantage in most cases. And we see the successful proliferation of their attacks nearly weekly with announcements about successful attacks, security incidents that are the result of a lack of prevention, a lack of investment in prevention and issues like that. And so my mindset comes from that traditional background, many observations, coupled with now the time that I've spent with Palo Alto Networks, engaging face-to-face with customers of ours and seeing up close and personal the challenges that they experience in terms of trying to build out resiliency in their security environments. So Ryan Olson, who I think you guys heard from yesterday, and I got together earlier this year, colleague of mine, he leads our threat intelligence research team, and talked about ongoing themes and things that we thought might be impactful for the coming year and beyond. And some of these themes or issues that we outlined, not necessarily prioritized, but certainly prioritized in terms of how they came to our minds of their importance for cybersecurity practitioners. Issues like the importance of automation, which I'm going to touch on heavily during the course of this presentation, the prevalence of ransomware attacks, and we now see yet again the results of a ransomware attack happening here in the US, targeting infrastructure, specific infrastructure in the gas and oil sector. Now we see long lines at the gas pumps, and then you begin to think, again, from an adversarial mindset, certainly strategically, how you might go about the process of essentially crippling a society, if you have the capabilities to attack electrical functioning or oil and gas capabilities within a particular region, and you begin to think and extrapolate how those capabilities might impact the ability to negotiate or carry on diplomatic relations. But ransomware, again, I remember the first instance of seeing ransomware as an FBI agent, and I am surprised that we continue to see it being proliferated. And I think it's right now in what they might consider a golden era or its heyday in terms of the ability to really impact enterprises. But yet and still, we see that the impact of ransomware really is carried out through an absence of organizations paying attention to simple things like vulnerability management. Again, a topic that I will touch on here a little later. We also have seen and continue to see both in the attack that I just talked about, an asymmetric approach by the advanced persistent threat, which I think has been consistently how they go about attacking the large scale enterprise. But I think we'll continue to see them really think outside of the box in terms of how it is that they gain access. The case study for this particular note, of course, last year's SolarWinds attack, which I'm sure that many of you both responded to and, at the onset of that particular attack, were forced to go back into your enterprise. One, make a determination as to whether or not the attack impacted your enterprise individually, but also to begin thinking about how is it that we prevent this kind of asymmetric approach in terms of protecting the enterprise in the future. How do you extend out your capabilities? How do you think asymmetrically about the size, scope, and protect surface of your enterprise? And then, of course, the mainstays, I think, are the bottom three you see here on the screen. One, the proliferation of financially motivated attacks by cyber adversaries, the need for small to medium-sized businesses to be thinking about platforms that will allow them to both level up their cybersecurity capabilities and sort of play in the big leagues, but at the same time, not crush their bank accounts, right? Because they don't have the deep pockets that many organizations may have in order to create a resilient enterprise. And then lastly, certainly an issue that resonates with me, having spent a career in the public sector here in the US, this idea that public sector entities, we think, will continue to be the targets of many types of ongoing attacks. And there's lots of reasons, and I'd be interested in hearing some feedback from you guys during the Q&A portion. Lots of reasons why this happens or why the public sector continues to be a target of cyber adversaries. But how do we help them? How do we help them extend their capabilities, look more strategically about identifying platforms or tools or processes that will allow them to create a more resilient apparatus and, again, not break the bank? So lots of drivers in terms of why is it that we need to be thinking differently about cybersecurity, why we need to be thinking differently about our approach. One of the key reasons we need to be thinking differently is, for those of you that have been in the industry for a while, understand that we have to get away from the old school mentality and thought process around the castle and moat analogy. That day is gone. As practitioners, you no longer have the benefit of being able to corral your data assets, resources, applications, and services behind the virtual four walls of an enterprise, position yourself on high and be able to look at ingress and egress of traffic in the enterprise, inspect it, and provide some relative assurance to your colleagues and others that you have the entire enterprise protected. The new image that we're all now having to adapt to, and you as practitioners should be thinking about, is the SASE model, right? The Secure Access Service Edge, the removal of the perimeter, because data, your digital assets, your information flows are nearly everywhere. Part of this is because of the proliferation of the use of the cloud, but again, things like SaaS applications, the fact that certainly in this instance, remote connectivity by stakeholders to business-related information, we need to change our mindset about how we deliver cybersecurity to the stakeholder, how we ensure protection and resiliency of the enterprise. And these drivers, I think, will continue to add complexity to the responsibilities of the practitioners moving forward. But again, I will tell you, and I keep using the term think differently about cybersecurity, because we cannot, as an industry, as practitioners, as a large scale enterprise, continue to do the same thing day in and day out and expect different results. In a second here, we're going to talk a little bit about what the state of play of the landscape is. And I, again, from both prior observations and current observations, of one to understand, and I constantly evangelize on this, that the adversary is winning. They, being the experts at return on investment that they are, continue to show their ability to successfully impact enterprises because they know what works. Unfortunately, practitioners don't have a firm grasp on what doesn't work. And this is and should act as a catalyst for all of us to begin thinking differently about how it is that we protect our enterprises. A couple of the other drivers, one big one, of course, is the change in the threat attack surface. I talked in the last slide about the SASE framework, or Secure Access Service Edge. And the fact of the matter is that as practitioners, your attack surface, the area of responsibility for you, has grown exponentially over the years. Again, another reason why you can't successfully use that old school approach of the castle and moat and be able to relatively ensure the protection of the enterprise without thinking about the proliferation of things like cloud, or the proliferation of the presence of things like IoT devices, or the fact that even before the pandemic, branch retail locations, in addition to headquarters, required you to think about network connectivity in a different way, which is why capabilities like SD-WAN have become important, and the ability to deliver both security and networking via the cloud is certainly a topic of interest and something that should be talked about, again, because of the proliferation and changes among the attack surface. And one of the things that should be a goal of yours as a practitioner is to reduce the attack surface and reduce it in a way that allows you, again, to deliver the resiliency that you're responsible for. I've been touching on this since the beginning, the adversarial mindset. Here's the takeaway for adversarial behavior. And these are the, let's just think about the prolific 18 to 34-year-old males, highly technical, all over the world, with access, right? Same level of capabilities that you have in your possession to defend the enterprise. Things like automation, things like highly technical, capable workforce. Remember that you're combating, in many cases, a completely anonymous adversary with autonomous capabilities as well, and a high technical margin in terms of their capabilities to proliferate attacks. These folks are experts at return on investment. They do what works, and they will continue to do what works for as long as the practitioners fail to deliver obstacles that can prevent them from being successful in the attacks that they proliferate. Again, this is a global problem, right? The observations that we all make about challenges to the enterprise do not have borders. And part of the problem, I'll get on my law enforcement soapbox here for a second, part of the problem is that we approach it with a geographical mindset when the adversary doesn't think about geography, they think about vulnerabilities. So all of that picture that I've created for you, hopefully, about the proliferation of your data everywhere, the need to be thinking about your networking capabilities differently, the need to be thinking about how you deliver cybersecurity capabilities, how you extend policy out throughout your enterprise, creates a exponentially growing and potentially alarming picture for you in terms of what it is that you're capable of doing in terms of providing protections. Now, the notional environment that you see here on the screen, pretty common, complex picture of a large-scale global enterprise and the issues that may pop up, the capabilities that are needed, everything from, again, SD-WAN through remote access, and then, of course, cloud access security brokers, or CASB solutions, and the continued and prolific use of firewalls. How do you manage it all? How do you ensure that, again, you can reduce the attack surface, reduce the complexity in terms of how it is that you're seeing this, so that you can virtually get your hands wrapped around it and, again, create resiliency in your enterprise that allows you to operate, enable the business, but at the same time protect its assets in a way that's informative. How it is that we've looked at this in the past, I think, brings about the three things that you see here on the screen. Growing complexity, natural security gaps that exist because of the very tactical approach that has historically been taken by most enterprises. In other words, let me go out and find a VPN solution. Got it. Maybe it's best in breed. Maybe it's what I could afford. And then let me go out and separately find an SD-WAN solution. Again, maybe it's best in class, best in breed, or maybe it's what the enterprise could afford. And I take all of these solutions, think about it in relative detail, again, taking into account the relative size of your enterprise, and you stitch together these solutions. Again, different vendors, maybe different solutions, and in some cases, maybe they get the job done. In many cases, as I've seen in my engagements with our customers, maybe they are not even optimized to their complete capability. And then you get, again, a growing gray picture in terms of the ability of cybersecurity practitioners to protect all of the digital assets of the enterprise. This, again, requires us to think differently about how it is that we approach security. The last issue there on the screen, let me go back here for a second, visibility. I had the opportunity to lead a large-scale SOC for a government institution, the FBI, for a very short period back in 2018. I can tell you I lost a lot of sleep during that short engagement. Thrust into a leadership position based on my technical knowledge of the environment, but at the same time, forced to use legacy equipment and hampered by the ability to really make long-term strategic decisions, yet responsible for providing dashboards, daily updates, informational reports to executives who are responsible for making decisions for the enterprise. The thing that I lost sleep on was this issue of visibility. And this is, in addition to issues like automation, one of the things that you will hear me reiterate again and again. I think visibility is the number one concern for security practitioners. And as you identify or think about how it is that you're going to change your posture, how it is that you should be thinking about what your enterprise looks like 12 months from now, 18 months from now, the issue of visibility should be the number one thing on your agenda in terms of the problems that you have to solve. So let's talk a little bit about the state of play or a state of the landscape, cyber threat landscape. I've had the opportunity to travel the world, both on behalf of the FBI and Palo Alto Networks, and talk about sort of the state of the landscape, bring folks up to speed on what we're seeing. Again, we've touched on issues like ransomware and the ongoing proliferation of attacks. I showed you in the themes or 2021 predictions slide, things that we thought were going to continue to be themes that practitioners should be thinking about. But I have been a consumer year in and year out of the Verizon data breach report, and I think that it remains a key way to understand, again, how the adversary happens to be maintaining their successful proliferation of attacks on large-scale enterprises. And so, the executive summary really is all you need to digest these reports. And it's shameful on the industry, right, as practitioners, that year in and year out, many of the same issues continue to be highlighted by this excellent observation of our industry, a global observation, I might add. They pull from lots of different resources around the world. I know that Palo Alto Networks, we contribute to it. I'm sure many of you work for organizations that likely contribute information to this annual report. Some things not a surprise. The fact that most attacks come from external actors or threat actors. Most attacks are financially motivated. Credentials remain the key priority for the adversary. And you could say these things year over year. And in fact, I have. And why is that? Again, thinking from the adversarial mindset, it's because these things continue to work for the adversary, right? They continue to be successful. Why is it that things like phishing and social engineering continue to be a core component of the ability of adversaries to gain access to enterprises? It's because it works for them. And why is it that we've seen in this particular report from last year a special call out to issues like ransomware? Is because it works, because they have figured out from both a campaign and an individual strategy that enterprises, one, will grapple with the issue of payment, right? And when I say grapple, it means they don't, it's unfortunate. Personally, I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, it's unfortunate, I think, that from a consulting standpoint, there are ways now to pay for the ransomware. It gives organizations an out, an unnecessary out, I think, in terms of not investing in prevention in substantive ways that will allow for them to be both resilient and to combat the types of attacks that come from ransomware, or not paying special attention to things like vulnerability management. Of the 1,000+ variants of ransomware out there, we know that the vast majority of them rely heavily on known vulnerabilities. Let me say that again. Of the 1,000+ variants of ransomware that are out there, many of them, the majority of them, rely heavily on known vulnerabilities. And as security practitioners, we all know that hygiene, vulnerability management's right there in the CIS 20, top 6 controls. One of the cyber hygiene, when folks talk about the fundamentals, when they talk about use of hygiene, these are areas where we need to continue as practitioners to invest, show that we have the capability to do this, look for tools, services, a platform, whatever it is that will allow you to get great at the fundamentals. And once we've gotten great at the fundamentals, once we have our hygiene in order, then we can look at the horizon and think about what the future might hold and how it is that you build upon that core foundation of great fundamentals and a hygiene to ensure resiliency of the enterprise in the future. If we dig a little deeper into the results from last year's observations, here's what we see. Each year, again, I've traveled globally and talked about this. Each year, 3 industries heavily impacted, typically public sector, financial, and healthcare. Slight change to that. Healthcare vaulted again to the #1 spot, as you see, by security incidents and successful breaches. Financial services continues to be hit and impacted. And yes, public sector, public administration continues to be hit successfully targeted. But you also see the entrance of things like manufacturing industry now being heavily targeted. And then certainly in my discussions, and I'm not sure if there's anyone online who has the capability or is responsible for protecting a manufacturing environment, very complex environments, again, a combination of things like legacy tools and equipment, a variety of locations, and now trying to take advantage of things like their posture in the cloud or use of the cloud. And it creates a complex environment for which they're responsible for protecting. They're leveraging technology in ways that they haven't historically. And this requires new conversations about cybersecurity and how you deliver security to those locations and ensuring that you have the ability, again, to create a resilient apparatus. You see highlighted on the right-hand portion of the screen areas that are, worth a little bit of a double click on, because many of them, continuous vulnerability management, secure configurations, just pure data protection or boundary defense, are things that, again, as an industry, we talk about year in and year out. And I, again, attribute the need to talk about this because the approach that we've taken, the approach that we continue to take, or should I say, those in the industry continue to take, is one that needs and requires us to think differently about it, requires a change, and requires one that's going to be substantive and allow us to create impact and resiliency for the enterprise. I've talked a couple of times about vulnerability management, visibility. If I could drill down on 3 areas, again, where I think security practitioners can spend that extra effort of time and, again, be thinking strategically about how do I take this outside-in approach? How do I look at my environment the way the adversary sees it and then begin to build protections? And contemporaneously, how do I start things like a zero trust approach by building from the inside out so that you eventually meet in the middle and you have both a strategic approach with tactical elements that will allow you to successfully protect your growing and expansive enterprise. And these, of course, require you to both be able to virtually identify what your attack surface looks like, manage it in terms of being able to reduce it. Things like vulnerability management, of course, become key. And I talked earlier on about, for me, visibility being the #1 issue. And of course, there's still a requirement, and especially now because of the proliferation of devices that you are now responsible for protecting, connecting to your business-related information, the need to have an endpoint strategy, a successful endpoint strategy, because it remains, at the end of the day, a last line of defense for you. So I've talked a little bit about these issues in terms of how it is that they've impacted the landscape. I want to spend a little bit of extra time talking about and double clicking on the issues of cloud, all things cloud, cloud security, automation, and the concept of zero trust and how it might help change your approach to security. So Ryan's team, Unit 42, recently released their report about first half 2021 observations of the cloud. Again, some surprises, some things not a surprise. One of the themes that continues to sort of be dragged from one report to the next is this idea of misconfigurations in the cloud environment. The same mistakes that security practitioners were making in on-prem environments once they have deployed to the cloud, those same mistakes are being made. Again, misconfigurations are a not necessarily a simple task, but again, so if these misconfigurations are consistently present, again, the adversary is going to rely on this approach in terms of their ability to successfully attack your enterprise. They did see from one report to the next things like cryptojacking actually on the decline in terms of cloud, which is good. But the takeaway from their report, high-level executive takeaway, is that sensitive data in the cloud remains exposed and vulnerable to attack. Now, the types of attacks that they've seen have all grown. Now, if we take a step back and we think about the past year or more in terms of how organizations both responded to, from a personnel standpoint, pushing everyone out remote, but also heavy investment in the cloud, use of the cloud and globally gone up tremendously or exponentially. And so those highlighted areas that showed on the previous screen in terms of the executive summary are now grown exponentially in terms of the challenges and problems that we face. But we also see, again, successful things by the attacker, like malicious port scanning, inability to get down into the controls that are necessary to provide security as your data now proliferates throughout both use of the cloud and still in on-prem environments. But really an increase across the board in terms of the types of attacks that we've seen in cloud environments. And again, the success of the adversary is something that should give us pause, and again, provide for you the ability to take a step back and say, hey, how are we protecting our information in the cloud, and are we doing the kinds of things that we need to do? One other thing I thought I would tease out here, one specifically because of the audience, is that things like exposed RDP by country. You see you guys in Canada leading, at least in this particular research report, by observation. Again, the idea here is, to the degree that we can, even the basics or fundamentals aren't being done. And because of that, we create a fertile environment for adversaries to continue to be successful. And believe me, it's through this successful accomplishment that they gain confidence, that they know their ability to be successful. One of the other things that I didn't mention that I think I should, and one thing that I think we lose sight of in terms of as practitioners, is this idea of agility. My observations from my time both conducting investigations and leading investigators over a 22-year period was that the agility of the cybersecurity adversary to be agile was one of the things, in fact, to me, it's the number one thing that makes them successful. And it's our inability to respond to that agile nature for which they now are marked by. Our inability to respond quickly to their ability to be quick and agile is why they continue to be successful. And again, an area that should be of note and importance to us. So cloud, again, continuing this conversation, industries heavily impacted by both our movement into the cloud, but again, taking with us all the mistakes that as an industry we've made. Retail industry continues to be hit hard. It's not a surprise. Again, I mentioned manufacturing a couple of slides ago in terms of the uptick of targeting those environments because of now their heavy use of technology, but now they have to figure out how to employ or deploy technology in their environments, but also security throughout manufacturing. Government, not a surprise to see the uptick there. If there's an industry, I think, that was really caught flat-footed as it relates to this whole idea of the remote workforce, I think the public sector industry was likely the most impacted because, as you guys who spend any time in public sector know, of a heavy reliance due to lots of factors. It could be classification of information. It could be just the culture of the organization. In many instances, having people show up physically in environments where, again, they are relying on that old school model of being able to maintain defense, keep things virtually behind, four virtual walls and be able to protect it. They, like everyone else, were pushed to their limits, pushed to the outside, right, in terms of remote work. And it's not a surprise, again, that the adversary sees this low-hanging fruit and begins to take advantage of things like organizations that were not prepared for the prevalence of remote access or remote activity. But interestingly enough, you also see, or we saw an uptick in issues like pharma and life sciences. And why is that? Because these are the entities that were heavily engaged in helping to create vaccines, doing research on the pandemic, exchanging information related to the pandemic. And again, not a surprise that because of the heavy emphasis on these industries, the adversary saw this, began to heavily target these industries. And so you see an uptick. And so again, agility here is the takeaway. Agility of the adversary. What they see on the landscape is what they respond to. What works for them is what they respond to. And as practitioners, you have to be thinking, how do I throw up roadblocks that will force them to look to a slower mover, maybe next to me in the industry, maybe in a completely different industry, but create enough roadblocks so that it shows, again, the resiliency of your enterprise. And again, I want to emphasize the idea that none of us can completely assure our enterprise that there won't be issues, but you can, through investment, through preparation, ensure that your response to what happens is not only adequate, but again, provides an opportunity to be resilient. Earlier slide, I talked about the importance of automation. I want to emphasize this, in addition to issues like, hey, how are you preparing for your journey to the cloud? How are you effectively deploying to the cloud? How are you, ensuring that you don't take your poor practices and employ them in your use of the cloud? I want to talk a little bit about automation, which is kind of the answer here to help us bridge that gap between what we might be experiencing as practitioners, what tools and capabilities are available to us as an industry, and how it is that we are going to close this gap in the future and moving forward. And here's one of the things, again, from the attacker standpoint that I want you to walk away with. How can you, if you understand that the attacker, again, has similar capabilities to you, and in fact, sometimes the same, maybe even better technology capabilities in terms of their ability to deliver attacks, how can you understand that they use automation in their attack, but you continue to rely on a human-centered approach to security without effective optimization or heavy use of automation, and at the same time expect to be successful? And the short answer is you can't. Automation is a key for us, folks. It will help us not only bridge the gaps that we have in security, but it will get us to a more responsive and efficient security environment if we begin to leverage the tools and technology and processes that can be automated, thereby not eliminating human effort and contribution to it, but freeing up your human resources to do more high-level work, more deep inspection. But there's tons of rudimentary things that happen in your security environment and otherwise that take up a ton of man hours and time during the course of a day or week. And automation can help you efficiently eliminate those redundancies, those things that happen, that have to happen in your environment, but do it in a way that allows you to, again, have a place where you can go to see the results, to log the information, or archive it. Single pane of glass that gets you there, that will allow you, again, to efficiently automate your environment, but at the same time, again, allow your human assets, your human talent to level up their capabilities and maybe focus on something that from a priority standpoint, again, allows you to free up resources. And so I would say that automation will play a key role in changes in the cybersecurity industry, with much of it being around the issue of behavioral analytics. Case in point, the SolarWinds breach that I mentioned earlier. As an organization, just talking, maybe trumpeting a little bit on the Palo Alto Networks response to the SolarWinds breach. As an organization, we were able to defeat the malicious activity through the use of our endpoint agent and endpoint strategy, but it was because of automation in the way of establishing baselines and user behavior analytics within our own environment, that we understood that the series of events that was occurring was not normal, should be inspected, required human intervention, but at the same time, the information that was gathered in order to make the decision to cease the communication at the time with the C2 server, again, was the result of autonomous actions that took place that once presented to human eyes means, hey, we need to spend a little extra time on this. Now, of course, when this happened in the weeks before it became national news, we didn't know that it would blow up to be an international breach or international news, but we were able to effectively respond because of our heavy use and emphasis on user behavior analytics. And so, again, automation should be a key of what you're talking about in those meetings with vendors. If you are not talking about automation, in addition to your conversations about cloud, in addition to your conversations about the secure access service edge or a SASE framework, then I think you're probably missing the boat on where things are headed. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about zero trust. Now, we had the benefit as an organization to have in our ranks the guy who actually coined the phrase zero trust, John Kennervog. John worked for us for a number of years, and so left his footprint on Palo Alto Networks, because during his time with us, it was that Palo Alto Networks really began to shift and think about zero trust in terms of our entire platform. In other words, delivering a ecosystem-like solution to our customers, but also internally. How is it that we want to look at zero trust? How is it that we build tools, services, and products that will allow for the tenets of zero trust to thrive in any environment? I think this topic, no longer just an industry buzzword, is at a point where we need to be talking substantively about how it is that your organization begins its zero trust journey. And there's lots of elements. I've seen and talked to a number of organizations. Typical question that comes up, hey, where do we start? Well, let me back up at least one phase. Let's all level set, make sure we understand what zero trust is, right? That's how the conversation typically begins. Where do we start? And then when you start, how do you go about building a zero trust architecture throughout a large scale enterprise? And how do you make sure it's sustainable, repeatable? And the short answer is slowly, one step at a time. Does require a fair time investment, but there are partners and ecosystems out there from which you can leverage. Palo Alto Networks happens to be one of them, one of the better ones, that will help you march along this zero trust journey. And this is where we're at, folks. Make no doubt. When I talk about thinking differently, when I talk about making that shift, I'm talking about two things: a platform consumption of cybersecurity tools, but secondarily, a zero trust architecture or approach, because trust, a human concept that we employ to machines inaccurately or inappropriately, it has been the vulnerability you seek, right? It has been the vulnerability that is the crippling weakness of the security industry for a number of years. And so we need to get beyond it, eliminate this idea of trust, and really deploy tools and systems that will allow us to challenge, have observational impact, extend controls and policies throughout the enterprise at every level, layer 3 through layer 7, ending at the application layer, of course, but allowing, again, that much needed visibility for the practitioner to be able to say, because of user ID, who this person is, where they happen to be located, what types of data they typically should have access to, when they're accessing, again, all of those elements that you take into account. You should be thinking about a security environment that allows you that level of control and visibility, and a proven way of approaching this. What you see here on the screen is the Palo Alto Networks way, in terms of defining what it is that you want to protect, making sure you can visibly document the transaction flows, the ones that are approved and appropriate, build out a zero trust architecture, create policy around this, and extend it, in many cases using automation, to the rest of the enterprise. But where to start is a process that requires you to think about how it is that as an organization you go about building that zero trust muscle that you desire. Slow steps, small data sets, small resources, applications, and then building that muscle to the point where you're ready to envelop the crown jewels of the organization and then extend out your zero trust capabilities. I talked about or used the term ecosystem because it's important. I think that as you begin to think about how zero trust might solve the problems of the future of your security apparatus, you need to be thinking about an ecosystem that's going to get you there. Organizations like Forrester have defined for themselves for the industry what those pillars look like. What you see here on the screen is our approach from the Palo Alto Networks vantage point in terms of implementation through our foundational products and our Strata pillar throughout the 8 pillars as identified by Forrester, and how it is that you go about thinking, again, both from a platform, but also, again, an ecosystem available to you to take that crawl, walk, run through building out a zero trust architecture. We happen to be one of the leaders in the industry. Of course, our goal is to be an undisputed leader, but if you're looking for an organization to help you embark or start on that journey, as the folks at Forrester indicate, look no further than Palo Alto Networks in terms of starting that journey through a vendor that provides an ecosystem that's substantive and can get you started on that journey. I want to finish out my time with you, just 2 minutes, talking about our approach to cybersecurity from the Palo Alto Networks vantage point. And before I do that, think about what we've talked about leading up to this point, state of play in the environment, how a change is required in terms of how it is that you identify tools and resources that can help you create that resilient cybersecurity apparatus for your enterprise. Our pitch, my pitch to you, is that a platform approach to security is what's needed. That complex picture that I showed you early on in this particular presentation, the way to combat that, the way to reduce that complexity and close down those natural gaps that are created through vendor sprawl within your environments, is to think about a complete platform, taking you from that adversarial view of your environment through the necessary posture of your network, cloud, and endpoint strategies, and then tying it off with a bow in terms of your ability to provide strategic cybersecurity insights and incident response services. This is the position that Palo Alto Networks now employs throughout the industry, or serves in the industry. Starting off with our foundational core products within our Strata pillar, again, going through our cloud delivered security solutions, having the industry's first cloud native security platform, ensuring that as you think about the difficulty of deploying to the cloud and use of the cloud, how is it that you approach via that multi-cloud strategy, a single pane of glass that will allow you to deliver security, ensure governance and compliance, and allow you to shift left in terms of DevOps. Prisma offers that. And then our Cortex pillar, or Cortex solutions, which are our approach to both endpoint strategy, but also securing or revolutionizing security operations throughout the environment, all undergirded by subscription services delivered via our firewall and its hardware, virtual form factor, and containerized series ability to impact your security enterprise. All of this, again, thinking in terms of the platform, how it is that it's delivered. My ask of you as you begin thinking about how can we do this differently is to think about how that platform approach might change how it is that you, one, optimize the security tools in your environment, begin to reduce the attack surface in a way that's informative for you, but again, give you the ability to pivot and change while leveling up your capabilities. From our vantage point, I talked about zero trust. I talked about the need to think differently about security. From our vantage point, four themes drive how it is that we've approached this idea of increasing visibility. Again, number one topic for me, reduction of the attack surface. If we continue the way that we have, case in point, by the year 2025, we're expecting something in the neighborhood of 42 billion devices to be connected to the internet. That's 5.5 devices for every person on the planet. If you're like me, just in your home environment, how many assets or digital resources do you have connected to your home internet? It's beginning to sprawl in a way that's out of control. Certainly for the large scale enterprise, much more difficult to contain. And so be thinking about how it is that you reduce that attack surface to something that's manageable. But then you need to be postured for themes 3 and 4 here. The idea of preventing known attacks, that's a given, right? You want to be in a position to prevent what's known out there, but you also don't want to be patient zero. You want to be in a position through user behavior analytics and other resources to combat unknown threats out there on the environment. And so this is the state of play. This is where we're at as an industry. I hope that you guys will begin thinking differently about what happens, because to end this with a phrase also from Sun Tzu, the attacker is coming no matter what. You cannot, in terms of your posture, simply say that it won't happen to you. You must prepare as if it's going to happen with the kind of assurity and confidence that allows you then to go out to the enterprise and at the very least ensure capabilities, ensure resiliency, ensure an observational vantage point, and that you are taking an approach that allows you the ability, again, to create a resilient cybersecurity apparatus and enterprise. Our goal is to partner with organizations like the ones that you represent, because it's only through partnerships. Cybersecurity is a team sport. It's only through these partnerships that you're going to get to a comfortable state. I won't call it an end state because technology and things are changing too rapidly and too quickly, but how are you going to get to that comfortable state where you at least feel like you are leaning into the problem and approaching it in a way that provides long-term solutions. Again, my name is MK Palmore, Field CSO for the Americas for Palo Alto Networks. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to this group, and I think we might have time for some questions. And if there are no questions, Kyle, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, MK. Great presentation. Everyone on the call, if you're still here, the breakouts start in 12 minutes. Make sure you're checking out the vendor village, chatting with our sponsors, and getting those tokens to be entered to win that $250 Amazon gift card. We will see you all later.